Good morning. My name is Shlomo Maital. I'm speaking to you from the Samuel Neiman Institute, a think tank here at Technion, Israel Institute of Technology. And I'm honored to address the 11th Pan-Baltic Scientific Business Management Conference held in Riga, Latvia. My topic is building a vibrant Latvian innovation ecosystem, theory and practice, and our case study is Israel. I will relate to you some of the lessons learned here in Israel and a great many of our mistakes that we've made. And I want to stress, however, that every country has to build its own innovation ecosystem. Innovation, to be successful, requires a system, an ecosystem. Each country builds their own. You cannot become Silicon Valley or Israel. You need to become Latvia. Why Israel? What can you learn from Israel? Israel began its independence on May 15, 1948, almost 70 years ago. We were a very poor country. We absorbed many millions of immigrants, people who came to Israel from other countries, and we've now reached a GDP per capita, rather impressive, of $38,000. Largely through a vibrant, innovative, high-tech sector and driven by thousands of startups. Our young people love to do startups despite the high risk and failure rate. So we get many visitors here at the Technion because it all began here. Our high-tech industry began at Technion, a small university. We still graduate only some 2,500 engineers and scientists a year. All of Israel graduates from its universities, only 900 computer scientists every year, and yet this very small number of people has created a vibrant, strong, high-tech industry that has made Israel quite wealthy. So what can Latvia and other small Baltic countries with strong academic institutions, what can they learn from Israel's successes, but also from Israel's failures and mistakes? I'll describe Israel's ecosystem. It's rather unique. Every innovation ecosystem is unique. I'll tell you some stories, draw some practical conclusions, and make some suggestions. So how did it happen? How did we get this vibrant high-tech startup sector? How did we become Startup Nation? A book that I recommend, as well as my own book called Technion Nation, about the Technion startup story. So it begins with our culture and character. Israel is a small country that has always had to fight for its survival, often without resources, and this has created a culture of improvisation and a can-do, almost arrogant air of self-confidence. I think this may resonate with you in Latvia as well. You're also a small country. I think you were independent in 1918, lost your independence, regained it in 1991. And as a small country, we share many common things with Latvia, our own desire, passion for our freedom and our independence. We have an important military, since we live in a bad neighborhood, and that enables us to survive. Young people learn from compulsory military service. We've had a great deal of good fortune. At the time that Israeli high-tech startups were booming, we got 1 million immigrants from Russia, and they were scientists, engineers, doctors, nurses, highly educated people, an incredible windfall of human capital. Without that, I doubt our high-tech industry would have been as strong as it is. We have migration of technology from the military to civilian uses through high-tech units in our army, where our young people practice, learn cutting-edge technology, and then finish their service and go on to do startups. We had timing that was important. The World Wide Web was born in 1990 or 91, and we caught the wave of the internet bubble, and many of our startups are involved with software, which is convenient for a small country because it just builds on brain power and not so much on industry or manufacturing. We have a venture capital industry. I'll tell you how that was created. was done by the government, and that may be something you can imitate. And we have a viral system. Young people hear stories about startup, Mobileye, sold to Intel for $15 billion, and they say, I want to do that too, I can do that. So here's the story of Israel's high-tech innovation ecosystem. It begins perhaps with our army service. I have 4 children, my wife and I. The children, our daughter, 3 sons, they all served in the army. They all got valuable experience in working with people, in teamwork, learning to get along with all kinds of people, leading, challenging yourself, discipline. These all come from army experience. We have strong universities, Technion, Hebrew University, Weizmann, Bar-Ilan, Tel Aviv, and these universities generate cutting-edge technology and science, basic research that sometimes becomes commercial products. We have a burning desire of our young people, many of them, to start a business despite the odds and the high risk of failure. We have finance for our startups, a VC industry which draws money from the US and lately from China. 10 to 20% of our VC money is now coming from Asia, from China, and these funds support our high-tech industry. We have growth companies, multinational R&D centers. Because Israel has a reputation as a startup nation, a nation of creative engineers, we have Amazon and Alibaba and 300 other multinationals coming to Israel. They often acquire a startup, and then they turn that startup into their R&D center to harvest ideas. Apple has done that, and Apple is a rare example of a company that usually doesn't do R&D apart from its home base in Cupertino, and they have bought an Israeli startup and made it into a fairly large, thriving R&D center. And finally, the government. And even though entrepreneurs will say that the best thing government can do is to leave them alone and not bother them, in fact, Israeli governments have played an important role in fostering our high-tech industry. Through grants from the Office of the Chief Scientist, now the Innovation Authority, and through the government's fostering of the VC industry by starting a government VC company that was eventually privatized after it paved the way for many private VC companies. Israel's situation is unique in many ways, so let me describe what could be a generic innovation ecosystem and suggest how you might apply this in your country, in Latvia. So, first of all, it's not enough to have great universities that do cutting-edge research in engineering and science. We need to transfer that basic research into commercial products. We need to help those ideas cross what we call the valley of death. The valley of death is this dry, parched, arid, dangerous desert between a scientific finding, a breakthrough in a laboratory, and a successful commercial product. And you cross the valley of death with management expertise, global knowledge, with resources, with management skill, human capital, and so on. So you need a strong process for transferring technology from the place it is discovered and developed, universities, to the marketplace. And you do need that strong background, that strong backing, the infrastructure of basic science. The Japanese did well for years by using other people's technology. In the long run, it doesn't work. Develop your universities, invest in basic science. This will become the bottom floor, the ground floor of your high-tech industry. We need lots of stories. We need Latvian stories about bold entrepreneurs who've had a huge vision and who have, against all the odds, succeeded, so that this can become viral and your young people can be inspired by these stories. We need to have an economy and a regulatory system where it's easy to do business, to start a business, to close a business, to get credit, to pay taxes, to register land. to rent space, and so on. And I'll speak more about that in a moment. But as a former Soviet socialist nation, Latvia has done well in dumping all of that bureaucracy and making it very easy to do business. It's much easier to do business in Latvia than in Israel. You need money, you need a source of funds. We have VC funds in Israel. I'm going to suggest that you be cautious about your VC industry. There is a downside to venture capital, and perhaps you can use your developed banking system to learn how to finance and fund high tech, something that doesn't really exist in Israel. You need a culture of risk, people who are bold, willing to take risks rather than play it safe. And there's an important role for government to play in all innovation ecosystems. So somehow Latvia needs to put all those pieces together. Innovation is an ecosystem. It's a system. It's a puzzle, and you need all the pieces. If you're missing an important piece, it will not succeed. And it all has to fit together. And again, it has to be Latvian, not Silicon Valley, not Israeli, but Latvian. Ease of doing business. A few years ago, with my two sons, my three sons, we went to Georgia and climbed Mount Kazbek. We did this in July. The weather was terrible. There was a fierce snowstorm on the summit. It was very difficult. Georgia's an interesting country. Georgia, former socialist republic, Soviet, had terrible bureaucracy. The president of Georgia got on a plane, went to Singapore, found out why Singapore was close to number one in ease of doing business, and then brought back those ideas, and very, very quickly Georgia moved up the ranks and also became a place where it is easy to do business. Latvia ranks 19th in the world in ease of doing business. That's a high rank, roughly around the area of Lithuania as well, which has done the same. Israel ranks 54th. So you've done much better than we have, and I applaud you in ridding yourself of the Soviet era bureaucracy. It's easy to start a business in Latvia. It's a little harder to get credit. Actually, pretty easy. You rank 12th. So some of these that are lower rankings you can work on, but this is an advantage that you can tell the world about. Invite the world to come to your country and tell the world, look, it's easy to do business. The World Bank has ranked us, has studied us, and we are one of the easiest places in the world to do business, to start a business, to pay taxes, to get credit, and so on. We have a famous entrepreneur in my country called Yossi Vardi, the father of an entrepreneur. He's now an angel investor, a wonderful speaker, very humorous speaker. And he's often asked about Israel's secret sauce. How come Israel is a startup nation? And quite seriously, he mentions the role of Jewish mothers. And I like to talk about Latvian mothers as well, not Lithuanian on the slide, but Latvian mothers. And Singapore mothers. Singapore became independent in 1965. As you know, Singapore had a visionary president, the founding president, Lee Kuan Yew. And Lee Kuan Yew made a speech not long after independence. And he told the mothers of Singapore, tell your children to go study mathematics in high school. We know it's pretty hard, and they may be reluctant to do so. Tell them to study math at a high level. And that means that they can then go and study engineering in university. And then they graduate, and then we can bring great multinational industrial companies, high-tech, to Singapore because we'll have the engineers that can staff their factories. That was Lee Kuan Yew's practical vision and his request to Singapore mothers. And the mothers did as he asked, and they told their kids, go study math. And their kids were obedient, and they did, and Singapore now has GDP per capita of $65,000 a year, which is more than double that of Latvia and close to double that of Israel. So mothers play an important role. Mothers can tell their children, go get a safe government job. That happens in many countries. Or like in Israel, I can tell their kids, you know what, go for it. Start a business. See what happens. If you fail, you get another chance. And since I practice what I preach, this is our son in the photograph with my wife, Shalma, with his mother. He worked for a time in the U.S. in a consulting company and retail company. Came back to Israel with his new wife. He had 2 job offers. One of those offers was with Israel's leading venture capital company, good, secure, solid salary, promotion, easy life. And the second job was to be CEO of a startup at 0 salary, a startup that struggled, had no money, with every chance in the world to fail. And like many young Israelis, he picked the startup. And he's now doing well and has raised several $1 million. And they're doing test pilot runs of their product, machine learning that helps anticipate and prevent traffic accidents. They're doing this in 3 American cities at the moment. So the role of the Latvian mothers is very important. Our young people dream big. This is a survey done of young people studying science and technology in Israel. And more than 3/4 of them dream of eventually launching a startup, and 1/3 of them say that they're going to do it soon, and 43% sometime in the future after they gather some more experience, some management knowledge. And that percentage is actually increasing. And this is despite the phenomenally high failure rate of startups. Startups are risky. According to a study done in Israel of 10,000 startups founded between 1999 and 2014, only about 4% of the startups succeed. And a very small fraction of those remain growing, profitable, and independent. More than 3/4 of our startups are acquired by foreign companies. And I'll talk more about that in a moment. Help your young people dream. We have many programs here at Technion, and one of them is a course that I've helped run for 30 years, and we simply invite entrepreneurs to come and tell their story, honestly, to tell about their failures and mistakes and crises. And students listen, and they think, I can do that. I'd really like to do that. I'd like to do the same. So here is an example of Israeli culture of work and the culture of self-confidence and bold vision. On the screen, in the photograph, you see 3 people. They are founders of a startup called Aquarius. On the right, a young lady is the marketing expert, and the 2 co-founders are on the left. You can see that they're not young people. I think they're in their 40s or 50s. They're not mechanical engineers. And they had a vision and an idea, an impossible idea. The idea was this: we are going to completely change the way the world makes internal combustion engines. Now, the internal combustion engine has been around for way over a century. And there are huge companies, VW, BMW, GM, huge companies, Mercedes, that have thousands of brilliant, talented engineers who are working on improving the internal combustion engine. And these 2 young people, 2 not-so-young people, have built a startup called Aquarius, and they want to reinvent the way engines are made. I'll tell you their idea very briefly as we move on. In a normal internal combustion engine, as you know, gasoline explodes and drives a piston, and the piston goes up and down. Now that up and down motion has to be turned into circular motion so it can drive the wheels. This is done by something called a crankshaft. And the crankshaft turns the up and down motion into circular motion. And in the process of doing that, the crankshaft loses a great deal of energy. The internal combustion engine is 20% efficiency. 80% of the energy is wasted. And these people, these Israeli startup entrepreneurs, have said, why? Why waste 80% of the energy? So they reinvented the internal combustion engine. Here's their idea. The piston exists and it is driven up and down in the cylinders. And then the energy of the up and down motion is used to charge a battery, an electric battery. And that electric battery sends electricity to the front wheels, left and right. There's an electric motor attached to the front wheels, and the piston's energy is driven directly through the battery to power the electric motor on the two front wheels, and the efficiency is 40% rather than 20%. Now this really does work, and car companies are taking an interest, and there is a patent on it. Now this may succeed or it may fail, but one could say, wait a second, these two people, plus the marketing person, in Israel, which doesn't really have an industrial automotive industry, we don't make cars anymore. I haven't made cars since 1970. What are they thinking? How in the world can they take on Mercedes, BMW, Volkswagen, General Motors, and all these big companies? Many of our young people think boldly in that fashion, and this is a key part of our so-called secret sauce. Help your young people to think boldly as well. I'm running out of time. I was asked to keep this to about half an hour, 30 minutes. So let me tell you about some of our mistakes that I hope you will avoid. Don't imitate other countries' ecosystem. Singapore spent a lot of money trying to imitate and recreate Silicon Valley. Silicon Valley is unique. It exists in California. It cannot exist elsewhere, not in that form. Do your own ecosystem. Do your own startup business model. Build it on Latvia personality, culture, and history, not on Israel and not on Singapore or Silicon Valley. One of our mistakes, Israeli startups almost all are acquired. They're acquired in part because they have venture capital funding. Venture funds are set up and they need to exit, they need to capture profits if there are any, and return them to the investor. And they need to do that in between 5 to 7 years. That's a very short period of time. And they're impatient and anxious for this exit, or at least an initial public offering of stock, which may be premature, so that they can extract their investment and repay their investors. So beware of the impatience of venture capital funds, because sometimes they are so impatient that they damage the companies that they invest in. Sometimes you need a much longer perspective. Israel has a startup called Mobileye. It's a company that was started in 1998-99. It took at least 7 years to develop the product itself. They were recently sold, that's 17 or 18 years later, acquired by Intel. But this company remained independent for that period, and that was important because they did not use VC funding. They used angel investors and other investors who were much more patient. Israel's business model, to be quite frank, is that we sell our brains. We invite multinationals here who set up R&D centers, they hire our engineers, and they harvest the ideas and they produce them elsewhere. We lose much of the benefit in that way. Capture your own ideas. Build companies around your own ideas and make your ideas in Latvia as much as you can. Try not to sell your valuable brains, if possible. So I will conclude here. I urge you to do some benchmarking. Look at small countries that have been successful and figure out why. Slovenia is another country about Latvia's size and population, and they seem to have done everything right, and their GDP per capita is quite high. Visit Slovenia. Come to Israel. Come to us, and I'll take you around to visit our startups and our government agencies. Zoom out of Latvia, and then harvest your ideas, come back and adapt them to the Latvian economy. And the last message is from a great company, from Nike. Simply do it. Take your young people stimulate them, motivate them, give them a bit of money, especially seed money. Try to develop small sums of money that help people get started. That's often the hardest part, is just getting started with minimal funding. So using the Nike mantra, just do it and help your young people understand that mantra as well. You have an idea? Sounds good? Give it a try. Go for it. Just do it. If you fail, we will applaud you for your boldness and your courage. If you succeed, of course, we will applaud you. You'll create wealth and income and jobs for the people of Latvia. Thank you for your attention. I wish your conference great success, and I invite you to come to my country and to Technion, where we can meet in person. Thank you.